All right, welcome to everyone who's joining. We are in our 11 o'clock breakout session for Economic Inclusion 2020. So the title of this one, Benefits of Being Proactive, Intentional Embracing of LGBTQ Issues, Individuals, and Interests. So if that is the session you were intending to attend, you are in the right place. If not, feel free to sign out and go back to your Whova app and look for the breakout session you had wanted to attend. Otherwise, if you were just looking, please join us and stay and enjoy the conversation. Just a few housekeeping tools. I will be monitoring things on the back end, so if you have any issues with technical issues, please feel free to use the chat either in Zoom or in the Whova app, and we will try to do our best to get you all access to the audio. If not, if you're having issues, this will be recorded, so you will be able to access the webinar later on, either at the end of today or next week, so that you can go back and review this as well. To make sure that you can see our speaker and our presentation, make sure to go to full screen. That will give you the ability to see both at the same time. If you have questions, please use the chat feature in Zoom to ask the questions, and then we also have Mr. James Holscher with us, who will be monitoring some of those questions as well for our presenters today. So without further ado, let's get started. And Dr. Dwight Eisenman, I will pass it to you.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you, James, and thank you, Gina and Chris on our panel. And thank you all to all the participants. We're really excited that you're here today for this really important topic. I have to confess, I normally don't wear a headset when presenting, and I usually present live. So, but I wanted to make sure there was no background noise, so hope it's not too distracting. But greetings and welcome to the Economic Inclusion 2020, Benefits of Being Proactive, Intentional Embracing of LGBTQ Issues, Individuals and Interests. We're really excited you've joined us today. My name again is Dr. Dwight Eisenman, and I'm happy to share a little bit about myself and then introduce the panel. I'm a healthcare executive. I live in Overland Park, Kansas, and my career has really been focused around learning and development. From a clinical perspective, I have a small private practice and teach LGBTQ focused psychology to fourth-year medical students and fifth-year psychology students at a university in Kansas City, Missouri. In addition, my research has focused on gay male alcoholics and relapse related to self-stigma, self-esteem, and internalized homophobia, or what is also referred to as heterosexism. I am gay, and I'm married to my husband, Justin, and we just celebrated our first wedding anniversary. So it's been quite the year for us. We have a panel today of two amazing people, Gina Weekly and Chris Schwartz, who both bring various professional and personal experience to this important topic. And I'd like to introduce them now. So Gina, do you want to go first?
Good morning, everyone. As he said, I'm Gina Weekly. I'm born and raised in Waterloo, Iowa. I did move away briefly for about 8 years, where I resided in Norfolk, Virginia. Returned to my city to just bring back my talents and gifts to the community that birthed and raised me. I reside here with my wife, Aisha, and we are just recently celebrated our 2-year anniversary. We're raising a teenage daughter together. I currently work for the Waterloo Community School District. I consider myself a youth advocate and community leader.
Thank you, Gina. Chris.
Yes, thank you. I'm Chris Schwartz. I was born and raised in Dubuque, Iowa, but moved here to attend school at the University of Northern Iowa, where I first studied music education, but then later decided to go into politics. I am currently the chairperson of the Blackhawk County Board of Supervisors. In 2016, I became the first openly LGBTQ elected official in Blackhawk County and actually all of northeastern Iowa. My other job is as the state director of Americans for Democratic Action, a progressive advocacy organization that I've been with since 2006. And I also currently serve as the president of the National Association of Counties LGBTQ Leaders and Allies.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. One other quick thing. So you'll notice I'm going to be glancing kind of around. I'm monitoring the chat. So this is really going to be an interactive presentation. We really want people to interact with us, ask questions. Nothing's off the table. You can ask us. This is definitely a safe place. So feel free to confront bias. We certainly are going to do that. Have an open discussion. So I'll check the chat as we move through our presentation, so you can chat questions, you can interrupt, you can use the raised hand feature. So we really want folks to feel free about that. And again, no question is off limits. So let's get started. So today we're going to be discussing 7 main points: organizational inclusion, looking at sexual orientation, becoming familiar with some key LGBT definitions, talking about cultural competence, talking about the business case, which is probably why most of you are here, key attitudes and approaches, and potential workplace challenges for LGBT and non-LGBT folks. Do a summary of Q&A, and at that point we have some interactive things we're gonna start off with, and then we'll bring those back at the end. And I hope that you all will allow me to call in some volunteers if people don't speak up. But first, let's talk about some numbers and do a self-assessment to kick us off. So I'd like you to either write down or think about the following questions. Do you have specific policies around anti-LGBT discrimination in the workplace? Do you include LGBT employee networks for your recruitment strategies? And do you provide LGBT diversity and inclusion training? And finally, do you extend benefits to same-sex partners outside of marriage? So we'll come back to this at the end during our Q&A portion, so be thinking about that. And I'll ask for some volunteers to share about their own workplace. Here's some interesting numbers, statistics regarding LGBT workers. 42% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual workers reported experiencing some form of employment discrimination. So sadly, that's almost 50%. But even more shocking is 90% of transgendered workers report harassment, mistreatment, or discrimination on the job. The cost associated with implementing non-discrimination policies, according to 67% of small businesses, $0. However, the annual cost of losing and replacing workers who leave their jobs due to unfairness or discrimination is a staggering $64 billion. At this time, I'd like to bring in our panel, Gina and Chris. And I'm going to ask, Gina, we'll start with you. If you could share with us one experience that made you feel included, and then one experience that made you feel excluded in the workplace. And then Chris, we'll come to you.
Absolutely. Well, one experience that just always sticks in my mind, last year I had the honor of being keynote speaker for One Iowa's Cedar Valley Workplace Summit. And to see that not only district leadership, so from our associate superintendent, our chief human resources officer, along with his office staff, supported me in my speaking. That was huge for me, to know that they were there. They valued the work that I was doing, but also to be a part of it and learn more of how we can be an inclusive workplace. But on the other hand, another experience that I have had was with another agency. I was working, and one day I got called to the front desk for a client who came in, and the client was upset and angry. And she referred to me and shouted out that I was a dyke in front of other clients and in front of our then CFO. And he walked away as if he didn't hear it, which everybody who was in that area heard it. So in that moment, it made me realize how undervalued I was with that agency.
Thank you, Gina. And in thinking about that, and thank you for sharing your personal experience, what do you think that your employer could have done differently to make your workplace more inclusive? Certainly the excluded portion, the excluded experience.
Yeah, in that moment, just to use his voice to let another adult know that treating just an adult that way is not acceptable would have made me feel valued and important in that moment. but
Sure.
going forward to put things in place to make sure that, you know, derogatory terms aren't allowed within our agency.
You know, and I think above and beyond that, and to the audience, you know, I think we can all agree that putting aside the legal aspects of discriminatory behavior, just from the perspective of being a human being, that that kind of harassment and bullying is just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good for the employer. It doesn't feel good for the coworker, and it certainly doesn't feel good for the professional. And so, Jen, I'm certainly sorry that happened to you, but hopefully something like today, right? This is how we make change. We talk about these things, we bring them to the table. So again, appreciate you sharing that personal experience. And Chris, how about you?
Sure. Thank you, Joy. So I'll start with a kind of inclusive experience, and I'll speak with my work with Americans for Democratic Action. When I was offered an employment with them, I had never heard of them before, and so I had to do a little bit of research to find out kind of where their values line up. And you know, this is a political and community organizing group, so I was very encouraged to find out that they actually were the first national organizations to defend the rights of LGBTQ people, starting way back in the 1950s when there was a big purge of LGBTQ employees from the federal government under the McCarthyism, and they stood up. And so I felt comfortable going into it, but then there was an incident in our community. I'm going to say about 8 years ago or so, where actually a young person had been killed in our community in a group attack, and things never really became completely clear about what happened. But reports were that anti-gay sentiments were yelled and stuff during this attack. Now the family kind of denied that that was that person's identity, and so it kind of made the whole thing complex. But when I explained this to my employer, they kind of their first instinct was to recognize and reach out to see how I was feeling. Like, was I feeling, you know, safe and validated, and just realize that what a troubling thing that was, and not be dismissive of it in any sort of way. And so that's been, and plus just the many times that they've allowed me to work on LGBTQ issues, even though that's not the core mission of the organization. I can say as far as dismissive, so a lot of the work I do is in coalition with other organizations. And so where I've kind of felt excluded was actually in some of the coalition work. I used to do a lot of work around the federal courts and court appointments, and we would organize coalition events and press conferences and media campaigns. And we had one partner in that was just really openly hostile and dismissive of LGBTQ people and issues. But we had other partners who were not dismissive of us, but were pressuring us to look the other way because they wanted this person, this organization in the coalition. And I felt it was really kind of to our detriment and really hindered our ability to bring in the numbers and the right kinds of people that we wanted to. And so it was really sad that even progressive organizations, progressive political organizations, were kind of willing to push aside the concerns of the LGBTQ partners in this coalition just to get this ally that they thought was key, that really, really to me just was not worth it.
Thank you for sharing that. And how about thinking about how an organization could have changed to make it a more comfortable situation?
Yeah, I think openly confronting the issues, you know, and if you're trying to build a broad coalition of people around people that are supposed to be fighting for issues of justice, then, you know, to me it should be just a given that you're not going to partner with an organization that openly is hostile towards your community.
And I think one of the things that, is difficult is we often don't know, right, that you have an organization in the community that is maybe volunteering and doing some good things, but you don't know, all that they're doing. And so certainly when it comes to philanthropy, companies give money to all sorts of organizations. And so I think it's important to really research and find out, what organizations are giving to, whatever minority group it may be. That if there's organizations that are giving to and donating money to causes that support discrimination, that we need to call that out. We need to flush that out. Can I call in the audience? Would somebody raise their hand if they'd like to share an experience that they may have had, and something where they felt included in the workplace throughout their career, and maybe some time that they felt excluded, and we can talk about that a little bit. Okay, well, I will share. Oh, okay, great. I like it. Okay, Angela, hello.
Hello. So, full disclosure, I have the same last name as Gina. I'm not her wife, I'm her sister.
Oh, okay, good. Welcome.
But I just wanted to share that as an ally in someone who lived outside of Regina's experience, that has made me do my job differently at Viridian. So it has made me more aware of things that I need to do to make sure my workplace won't have that experience for someone else.
Thank you for sharing that. It's and thank you for your emotions. This is an emotional topic, and it's frightening for people, and it brings up all sorts of things. And from a clinical perspective, oftentimes LGBT folks have been bullied and discriminated and harassed. And when we go to work, which is the majority of our time, right? We spend 40 plus hours a week at work, some of us more than that. We want it to be a safe place. We want it to be the place where we can, have a work family and feel like we can be ourselves. And so, Angela, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing your perspective on that. I just want to take a minute and share a personal experience I had, and it really kind of piggybacks on what Angela said. So in my previous position, I had a supervisor, a leader that I was very close to, but for 2 years, I didn't come out to her, and we're going to talk a little bit later about some of the terms like coming out if people are unfamiliar with that. But I didn't disclose my sexuality to her for multiple reasons. One of which is that I feel that sometimes, my professional life is different than my personal life, even though the two intersect oftentimes. But more importantly, she had given the message to me without realizing it, that I didn't feel safe disclosing my sexuality to her, disclosing that I had a partner, soon to be husband, because she would talk about political things, stereotypically a political party that is predominantly anti-LGBT. And so I felt unsafe to disclose my sexuality to her, above and beyond the fact that did it really impact the way I did my work. But then I thought, I really feel close to this person. She's my leader. We have a great relationship. We collaborate well. And so when I came out to her, her first response was, "Oh my gosh, why didn't you tell me sooner? My nephew's gay." And it was all just kind of a wonderful experience, after I guess basically had the courage to tell my truth to her. She didn't realize that her behavior was giving me the signals that it might not be a safe place, but that was not who she was, right? And so I think it's important that we recognize that as well. Fast forward to my current position, where my organization is very diverse and very inclusive. And from day one, they talk about how inclusive we are, how diverse we are, and they really want that. And so right away, I felt very comfortable talking to my current leader about my personal life, and that felt good. And so same end result, right? Same end result. Two wonderful experiences, but I just wanted to kind of show you the dichotomy between the two, which was, one, I felt unsafe based on my own past experience, based on my life experience. And so I challenge the audience to remember that when we're talking about minority groups, we're talking about people that have had different life experiences. So thank you for letting me share that. Two
Right.
chats, yeah, James.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Barbara asked a question kind of to that last point. I know you're going to be talking about coming out, but does one need to be out in order to be discriminated against?
No, they don't. So oftentimes discrimination doesn't have to be so overt, right? It can be microaggressions, it can be little things. So for instance, reflecting back on my boss, who by the way, my former boss, I love her. She was at my wedding, great relationship, but let me just share that, without her realizing, something like politics, maybe it's not appropriate in the workplace. And so the message I was getting were little microaggressions around this, what I perceive to be anti-LGBT stereotypes. And so I was not out to her, but felt discriminated on some level, almost, kind of a self-discrimination that I couldn't be myself around her. And in turn, that can be a domino effect. Do I then want to not come out to my staff? Do you, it's a fine line that you walk at what goes from being professional and then this gray area of professional personal life, and then moving into total personal life. And I've had both experiences. Early in my career, I had staff. I shared 100% about my personal life. As I matured as a leader, I realized that wasn't so great. And now I'm a little bit more discriminatory about what I share. Not about my sexual orientation. I'm openly gay in the workplace, but just little things. You want to make sure that you keep that line between personal and professional. But thank you, Barbara. That's a great question. And Melody, let's see. Even something as simple as having gender-neutral bathroom at work has done so much to make me feel supported at work without anyone actually doing or saying anything. Oh my gosh! Thank you for chatting that to us. One of the things we'll talk about as we move through this is the fact that little things. And so, when I teach on Monday nights to the class, and one of the things I love about that is I'm helping these future doctors to think about things they never thought about. So if they have a private practice, when somebody walks in to see a very small little rainbow flag, maybe on the door, or a brochure about inclusion, I think that folks would agree that are part of the LGBTQ community, we're constantly navigating our surroundings. Am I in a safe place? Am I looking for a signal that it's okay for me to be myself? I spent a lot of time in Miami, lived in Miami, and in Miami, it's fairly safe to hold hands and this sort of thing. But when I moved to the Midwest, I didn't feel as safe. And again, some of that is my own bias. But I think that little things such as a gender-neutral bathroom, you don't have to say anything, and it makes somebody feel included. And Barbara says, to clarify, I mean discriminate against from a legal perspective. That is, if hearing anti-LGBT slurs could be brought on as a discrimination case, even if it's not known to be LGBT. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a professional around discrimination laws, but I would just say as a professional, my understanding would be that if somebody in the workplace called me a faggot, and I went to my HR team and said, this is what happened, and nothing happened around it, then I would think that I would have a discrimination case if steps weren't taken to protect me based on whatever laws are in the state and or federal laws. Good discussion. Thank you for allowing us on the panel and you in the audience to share a little bit of personal history there. Okay, so next I'd like to do a non-LGBT self-assessment. So if you're part of the LGBT community in the audience, welcome and thank you. If not, let's do a little self-assessment, and I'd like you to write down or think about some reactions regarding the LGBT community when you just kind of hear the term LGBT. Like, what does that mean to you, right? I'm going to read you some common reactions that we've heard in the workplace and just kind of through life experience. And then I want us to think about, how these might make somebody feel on a more interpersonal level. So some common reactions we hear when talking about discrimination in the workplace. This just isn't what I was brought up to accept. Will being okay with gay issues lead to conflict with others? This is too political for me. How will this influence my relationships with coworkers? I will just be politically correct and go no further. It's just easier to keep my mouth closed and not discuss. And are people going to start thinking I'm gay? So with that in mind, and you reflecting on kind of your own non-LGBT self-assessment, imagine how you would want other people to react to you. And we're going to find some ways today to work together and learn basic terminology around the LGBT community. So you as allies, and I feel like everybody on the phone is an ally, how we can all start working together to make people feel included and feel inclusive, not only in the workplace, but everywhere. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so we see here on the slide, sexual orientation as a person's permanent emotional, romantic, or sexual feelings towards certain other people. Everyone has a sexual orientation and a gender identity. And everyone falls on a scale of somewhere between purely heterosexual and purely homosexual. Sexual orientation also refers to a person's sense of identity based on those attractions, related behaviors, and membership in a community of others who share those attractions. In relation to sexual orientation, you might also have heard the terms coming out or closeted. And just a few minutes ago, we were talking about being closeted in the workplace. So coming out, that's the process in which one acknowledges and accepts one's own sexual orientation. It also encompasses the process in which one discloses one's sexual orientation to others. So I shared how I came out to my boss. And again, that experience was difficult for me. I will say that my husband encouraged me to do that, and I'm really glad he did, because it made my boss and I closer. And again, I think sometimes those that are not part of the LGBT community feel like it's always their fault if people aren't included in the workplace. But you know what? This was on me. This was my own self-discrimination about how she might feel. So just want to throw it out there. And let's see, Christy says, Dwight, you are spot on regarding harassment. And as HR professionals, we have the additional responsibility to ensure we're creating an environment where the person feels safe in responding directly and speaking their truth. Thank you for that. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And back to our slide here for closeted, and that refers to a state of secrecy or, sorry, let's see, I'm jumping ahead too quick. There we go. Closet is being, say, the secrecy or caution regarding the privacy of your sexual orientation. Some key definitions, these probably will be pretty familiar to most of you, but if not, then I'm happy to share. So first and foremost, LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered. You might also hear the term LGBTQ+, which stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, queer, and plus, which means to be inclusive of anyone who may be struggling or unsure of their sexual identity. Lesbian is a female who is sexually and emotionally attracted to females. Lesbians are also gay, but the term historically or typically refers to males who are attracted to other males sexually and emotionally. Someone who is bisexual is attracted to both females and males, and it's important to know, and I love this because one of my students pointed this out, and I've shared this every time I do a presentation like this or talk about this topic, that bisexual does not mean that you're attracted 50% to each sex or the opposite sex. So you don't have to be, 50% attracted to women and 50% attracted to men to be bisexual. You could be attracted to 90%. If I'm heterosexual and I'm a male and I'm attracted 90% to women and 10% to men, I can still be considered bisexual if that's how I define myself. And transgendered is an, I'm sorry, did somebody want to?
No, I got a question for you when you get back.
Oh, yeah.
No,
okay.
Going.
Let me just finish this and then we'll get right to that. So transgendered is an umbrella term for when someone's gender identity does not match their gender assigned at birth. Being transgendered is not about sexual attraction or sexual identity. So there's a difference there, and on the next slide we'll talk a little bit about that. But also really important, and again, I feel like everybody on the phone is this, and one of the most important terms is ally. And an ally is somebody who is not LGBT but supports equality and speaks out for inclusion. So thank you for that. Yeah, James.
So so when it comes down to, this is an evolving acronym. So is it acceptable to be close? So in a sense, if I say LGBT, or if I say LGB, or
Mhm.
so is in a sense, do you get credit for trying,
Yes, of
or
course,
do you have to have it
absolutely.
perfect?
No, no, it's an ever evolving term, and I think that the LGBTQ plus community, I often just say LGBT, the goal is to be inclusive, right? And so we want everybody to feel like we have a big tent that is inclusive of everybody. And so I think that as an ally, somebody that makes the effort to understand our community, ask questions, and try to use terms that are comfortable and appropriate, such as saying, you know, LGBT, I think it's fantastic. So thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for bringing
Can
that to the
I
table.
jump in?
Yeah, please.
So, hello, my name is Jennifer Waldron, and I think one of the pieces that you responded with is this idea of a big tent of inclusivity for everybody, and I think that that is a really important part of our queer community. And the other piece that I just want to add in response to James is that you absolutely get lots of points for trying, and I think my ask would be, if you hear someone using, if you're in conversation with someone and you hear them using a different acronym or a different language choice, that you try to mirror that language choice in conversations, and that that always makes me feel much better that someone has heard that I choose different terms and that they're trying to use them in continued conversations.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on that, Jennifer, it's okay to ask people, right? Hey, I want to do the right thing. So I have staff that are African American or Black, and I want to make sure that um, I use correct terms that make them feel comfortable. So yesterday I was in a conversation with one of my staff members, and I said, you know, gosh, I'm doing this presentation tomorrow. I'm super excited about it. And when we talk about inclusion and diversity in other minority groups, I often use the term African American. How do you feel about that? And she said, you know what? Actually, I prefer that you say Black. And so I felt proud to ask her that, even though it felt a little bit uncomfortable, because, you know, I don't want to feel like I'm offending anybody, but how am I offending somebody if I'm going to make the effort to make them feel included and inclusive? So Jennifer, thank you for bringing that up. Any other comments around that? I don't want to feel like we're rushing through, and I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak if needed. Okay. Next, we'll talk about gender expression and gender identity, and you know, just ending on the last note there about transgendered as kind of an overall term. Gender expression and gender identity give us additional insight of what it means to be transgendered. Gender expression is how we present ourselves to the outside world. So we do this through our clothing, our mannerisms, our communication patterns, or the way in which we relate to other people. And I'll challenge you, you know, to take a minute to think about how you express your own gender to others. And so if I'm a heterosexual female, I may express myself in societal norms around how a female is stereotypically supposed to be, right? If I'm a heterosexual male, et cetera. One of the challenges, I think, in the LGBT community is often it's difficult to express oneself because we're fighting against a heterosexist normative kind of ideal around masculinity and femininity. And so, you know, I again encourage folks to let people be who they are, right? And we can express ourselves in any way that makes us feel comfortable. In addition to this, gender identity is our innermost concept of ourselves as male or female. Most people develop a gender identity that matches their biological sex. And again, let's take a moment and imagine what it would be like if the way you felt inside didn't match the way you felt outside. And imagine the struggle to feel complete if you felt male or female on the inside, but your outside presented differently, how hard and confusing that might be. And I always love when a celebrity or somebody comes forward and gives us the opportunity to bring a spotlight to all sorts of different things. And, you know, I think when Caitlyn Jenner came out, came out as transgendered and started her journey and shared that, regardless of how you feel about her as a person or a reality star. I think that just her being on the cover of Vanity Fair magazine brought a lot of great attention to the journey of our transgendered colleagues and friends and family. Any questions around gender expression versus sexual identity?
I guess, Dwight, one thing that I would add is just
Please.
a person expresses a gender, it doesn't mean that they desire to identify as that gender. A lot of times I get questioned, well, do you think you're a man or do you want to be a man? No, this is just how I'm comfortable. So oftentimes, some people can confuse those two.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. Thank you. That's very true. That do not assume anything and don't stereotype, right? We don't want to stereotype people. Barbara, could you take yourself off mute and ask your question? So Barbara's asking about asexual. So, there's all sorts of various ways that people identify, you know, whether it's, LGBT, pansexual, people are attracted to the person, the spirit, so to speak. They're not attracted to a gender, they're attracted to the spirit of the person, and that can come in many forms. Somebody that considers themselves asexual is somebody that is maybe abstinent or doesn't feel like they're attracted to either sex. Or the spirit of the person, they're just kind of a non-sexual person. Oh, got it. So Barbara says she's not able to use her mic, but does that help answer the question on asexual? And thank you for that question. Good one. Okay, so back to our slides, and thank you as I work through some of these. Let's talk about inclusion and cultural competence. So, of course, our goal is to make each of us feel inclusive and included in our workplace. This is important for many reasons, and I love that we're starting to get to kind of the meat of how we can be inclusive in the workplace. But this is important because, the ability to maximize our potential as contributors inside and outside the workplace. So utilizing the stories that we've heard from both Chris and Gina and myself, imagine that if I have all this great potential, but I'm inhibited from expressing that because for fear of discrimination in some way, right? And so as business owners, as business partners, as professionals, we want to maximize the potential of our employees and colleagues and those in the workplace. We don't want to diminish that in any way or and hold them back. So full participation. So we want to maximize our potential as contributors inside and outside the workplace. Inclusion is a practice that enables the full participation and contribution of the workforce in support of the mission of the organization, important to everybody. And we do that by eliminating implicit and explicit barriers. Like, I love the gender neutral bathroom, such a simple thing, and how many barriers did that take away? Just fantastic. And we can start by being culturally aware and competent through a combination of skills, knowledge, and awareness pertaining to the cultural differences and different interpretations across various groups. This includes respect and awareness that everyone from a particular background may not hold the same beliefs and practices. And most importantly, it's okay. Like, it's okay. I think we have fear that, if we're not doing this or that somehow it's bad. And it's okay to respect and be aware of all sorts of different things out there in the world. And of course, we thank you all for joining this module today because you are participating in maybe this is the first step on your journey of that, or you're well into it, and so we thank you. And so now let's talk about the workplace and key attitudes and approaches to understanding differences and embracing individuality. But before we do that, any thoughts or questions before we move on? Okay, so the business case, right? Like, one of the reasons we're all here today. So employers that develop and implement workplace strategies that address and create fair workplaces for LGBT employees can enhance corporate reputation, increase job satisfaction, and boost employee morale. I think we often talk about certainly for the HR professionals in the audience, the challenges of, okay, lawsuits, right? We're lawsuit adverse. Challenges of making sure that, people are feeling good. But we often don't talk about all the other reasons why we want to do this besides, from a legal or HR perspective. But, we want people to have, we want to have a good corporate reputation, right? My organization has a stellar corporate reputation because we have a foundation of inclusion and diversity. We want to increase job satisfaction. The cost of replacing employees, certainly if you're at a level where you're, trying to retain or recruit staff from all over the United States, and certainly with a new virtual environment, we have the ability to recruit top talent from across the United States. And so we want to increase our reputation to attract that top talent. We want to increase our reputation for job satisfaction. We want to boost employee morale so we have people stay for long tenure of time. Of course, all these things enhance our corporate reputation, business opportunities, employee recruitment, productivity, and as I just stated, decreases legal vulnerability, which, from an HR perspective is really important. Many businesses do not know that they may have gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered employees. LGBT employees may spend a good portion of their energy hiding and staying closeted and compartmentalizing their personal lives to avoid negative consequences in the workplace. And that can be my situation I shared about, where a lot of it was coming from my kind of own stuff, as we say, or from the signals that are in the workplace, because it really truly isn't an inclusive or included or diverse workplace. And yeah, somebody going to say something?
Dwight, this is James again. And
please.
Gina, when we had talked about in preparation for this, you'd visited a little bit about this. Can you talk a little bit, Dwight mentioned it, but can you talk a little bit about that stress that in a sense is like, okay, I'm trying to do my job, but you've got all this other stress. Can you just visit a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people don't know, but almost 27 years of my life, I lived closeted. And I often tell people the hindrance of that was I was never able to bring my full self to anything that I did. And I feel as if now when I look back at it through experiences, I finally am able to be the best version of myself. I don't have to worry about, like he's saying, what anyone else thinks or says. And at that space, I'm able to operate at my full capacity. I don't have those stressors of thinking about what will happen if or what happens when, because I'm operating at my full capacity. And the only way that folks can operate at that capacity is if there is a certain level of acceptance and inclusion that is shown to all employees, making them feel welcome, making them feel a part of that process so that they are not only able but willing to bring all of their gifts to the table and want to contribute to the growth of that agency or that organization. If we're not allowed that opportunity, we won't, and it would just be a job for us,
Chris,
you'll be recruited away, right? So if you're in a situation where you're not maximizing your potential and it almost feels like you're not allowed to do that, you'll find a new job. Chris, did you want to add in too? That'd be great if you could.
Yeah, so like Gina, I spent a large portion of my life in the closet. I remember I thought that when I started college, I'm like, okay, this is going to be the opportunity. I'm going to be out. And that was 22 years ago, 1998. And then that was, the same fall that Matthew Shepard was brutally murdered. And it scared the hell out of me, enough to stay in the closet for a number of years more. And finally, when I knew that I had wanted to run for public office from starting in my early 20s, but it took me until I was 35 to finally feel ready, and mostly to feel like the society was ready for that. And of course, it didn't all go completely as I had wished. We're coming up at about 4 years now that in the build up to the election, just weeks before that my fiance and I, our home became the site of a hate crime. When we had anti-gay death threats spray painted on our front porch door or our front door, as well as like on our signs and stuff. And it was a really, really chilling moment. And there was a lot of really positive community outpouring, but there were a lot of people that really disappointed me at the time and stayed silent, and also didn't really understand the level of what we felt like we were going through. People just kind of would even, say things like, "Oh, we're sorry that vandalism happened to you." Well, this wasn't just vandalism. This wasn't someone like ripping up our signs or something or something like that. This was someone coming to our home in the middle of the night and putting a death threat on our door. And it really shook us for a long time, and we had to live with that kind of fear and trauma. It's still something we have to watch out for as a very public and very visible gay person in the community. And the thing that was kind of most disappointing for me is that there was after the initial police report, there was absolutely no follow-up from the police department on what had happened, not even a phone call back to tell what they had looked into and all kind of stuff. And so it made me realize that I had to make a choice when I was going to run for office, how much of my sexual orientation I was going to make a part of the campaign. And I decided that I owed it to young LGBTQ people to try and demonstrate that things are getting better and these things are possible for you. And so we did make it a central part, and people would say like, "Oh, you're just trying to get elected because you're gay." I'm like, that's worked so well for so many people because there's literally like 8 out LGBTQ officials in the whole state of Iowa. And so that was, I think maybe a little bit of a tangent there, but it's I think relevant to the conversation about though there's a lot of progress in the community, there's always that really kind of hateful element that's still out there, and folks don't quite understand that.
Very true, and thank you, Chris and Gina, for that perspective. I think one of the things, and on Chris's point, as much as we want to separate our personal lives and our professional lives, the experiences that we have in life just translate into all areas of our lives, right? And so Chris's experience with the hate crime is naturally going to make him apprehensive in the workplace. And he's going to be looking for signs and signals that, is this a safe place for me? Is this an area where I could feel comfortable working? And if he doesn't, he may move on to the next job. And we don't want that. We want to get the best candidates in our businesses. Jennifer says, we're very proud to have you as an out public official in our community. The experienced death threats you were sharing was terrifying to read about. It could happen to my family. Thank you for continuing to show being out. Thank you for that. And here, absolutely, definitely. So with that said, LGBT folks continue to hide in the workplace, and we don't want that. Another kind of business case for that is that various minority groups filled with the best potential, right, the best candidates, will look for signals of a business. So when I'm looking at when I'm being recruited by an organization, let's say, I want to see how are they treating other minority groups, because that's going to be indicative of how they're going to treat me. And so just something to keep in mind. Hey, can everybody hear me? Gina, can you hear me now?
Yep,
okay, sorry about
fine,
that.
Dwight.
I was, something was happening with my headset. So I don't know if you heard, but so LGBT folks are conditioned to hide in the workplace. And so one of the things that folks in the community might do is look at organizations, how they treat other minority groups. And this can be indicative of if I'm being recruited by an organization and I see that they have wonderful diversity policies, then I'm going to feel safer there than an organization that doesn't do that. So just something to keep in mind there.
Hey, Dwight, I just wanted to give you a heads up. We're just about a couple of minutes from wrap up time, and just kind of thinking through the rest of your presentation.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump to this. Thank you, James. I'm going to jump to this because I want to have us to have some time for a little bit of discussion. So just this is I just kind of want to read this to you. I think it's a good thing that some ways that we open our minds to become culturally aware and embrace differences is by first understanding that each person has individual strengths, perspective, and preferences. Each person has a unique story to tell. Each person has had moments of challenge, grief, happiness, and triumph. By embracing an attitude of open-mindedness does not mean you must agree or accept. It merely means that you are willing to help foster an environment of mutual respect and dignity. Being open-minded allows us to be flexible and adaptable to ever-changing situations, people, and environments. So as human beings, as people that share a planet, we want to live this. As business people, we want to create an environment that we attract the top talent, that we retain the top talent, and everybody has an opportunity to maximize their potential. So with that said, I'd like to revisit, I'm just gonna get to the end here. I'd like to revisit the first slide or the second slide where we did the self-assessment. Anybody willing to share with us in the last few minutes how they self-assess themselves? And open the floor to questions because I want to make sure that, does anybody have any questions for us? And sorry that we, sometimes when you have good discussion, you run out of time on the slides, but that's okay.
You may want to go back to those self-assessment questions so people can remember them too.
So the first was the time considering, thank you for that, Angela. The time considering your reaction regarding the LGBT community. And then just organizational inclusion, that do you have specific policies around LGBT discrimination, recruitment strategies, diversity training, and extending benefits to same-sex partners. So if you have those things, great. If not, this is a great opportunity to bring them forward to leaders and talk about these things because this will help your business grow and help you be a community leader. So what questions do we have? Anybody have any thoughts around what we talked about today? Any fears about talking to your leaders about being LGBT inclusive if you're not already?
If you want, I can answer this question you have up here too.
Sure.
We're waiting for people to
Please.
ask questions. So while Gina didn't come out for years, I assumed and wondered if she felt more comfortable as part of the community. So I started educating myself way before she came out. And so then this made me think about it made me more aware of my surroundings and in my workplace, in my friend environment, in college. It allowed me to be more open and more educated so that when she did come out, that we could embrace her as a family. So we had secret side conversations. And I don't know that made her coming out any easier, but at the same time, we had all of those conversations and we educated ourselves for Gina, but as a result, it helped us in every aspect of our life. So you might do it for somebody you love, but then you can change that to make it for your whole person, everything that you do. So.
Absolutely. And one of the slides we didn't get to, but I'll share it really quick, that, research shows that one of the challenges and action items I always say to our LGBT brothers and sisters is it's important to come out to people because you change lives. And what happens is that if I come out to you, research shows that you're going to be more willing to be more accepting and more inclusive to somebody else. And so it sounds like an obvious, but it's a wonderful thing. Gina, did you want to say anything to Angela and respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you live and operate in fear, it honestly does not matter how much, and she said they did it in secret, which they did, but when you're in a place of fear, it doesn't matter how much support you may have. if you're afraid of losing that support. It was good to know once I finally did come out to my sister, she was the only person that I felt comfortable enough speaking with. But even after I came out to her, I was like, okay, now you need to tell mom, or you need to tell this person, because I was still afraid of losing those people. And that fear of loss is a heavy, heavy burden to bear. And like I said, you stay in that closet because it feels and it seems safe there. But what we sometimes have to realize is in the coming out, there are people out here who will love and protect us and be there to help guide us through it. And one of the reasons that I vowed to myself to never go back into that closet or hide any parts of me is because of our future generations. I look at my baby niece, for instance. She's 3, and she calls me just about every day. And she may ask me little questions here and there, but it's just like oh, okay. Like, I get it. Like, you're just different, and it's okay to be different. And if we begin to teach our young people as well as our adults that being different is okay, then our world and our values around differences can begin to change.
Wow, what a great way to wrap up our presentation. Thank you for that, Gina. Thank you, all of you that came today to take a step forward towards diversity and inclusion in the within the LGBT community and helping us to find ways to be more inclusive. I put my email on the chat, Dwight Eisenman, my name, at me.com. If any of you have any questions or you'd like some follow-up or just want to chat, I'm happy to have you do that. It's people like all of you on the phone that came together today to help us and share information and collaborate is really inspiring, and thank you for that. And I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, an amazing weekend. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, James, for allowing us to speak to this group today. Thank you, Molly, for moderating. And thanks, everybody, for your questions and your time. We certainly appreciate you. And again, if you have any questions, Dwight Eisenman at me.com. I'm sure you can reach out to James and get in touch with Gina and Chris as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Very
weekend.
good. Thank you all so much. And Molly, I don't know if you have any technology last minute suggestions. Again, thank you very much to the panel. Molly? Oh, Molly, you're on mute there.
Yes, thank you. Again, this session will be recorded, so if you did have any difficulty or kind of came in late or had to leave early, you will have access to recording in the coming days. So be checking that Whova app again for when those get uploaded. So otherwise, we're getting ready for our 12 o'clock session, so feel free to sign out and go to your Whova app and join your 12 o'clock breakout session.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.